Hey everyone, I'm here with Elise Chan. I'm James Roloff. We are from Powder Keg Web Design. We wanted to quickly have a conversation online today, just talking through some common things that people come to Powder Keg, with as far as goals or priorities when they're doing a new website or website redesign, and just kind of have a quick conversation about the top things we're seeing, and maybe it'll resonate with your business, or maybe we can help provide some helpful tips and thoughts on how we approach these situations too. So. Me and Elise will each share a couple of different things we're thinking about. So I'll let Elise go first with what's on her list.
Yeah, so the first common reason that I hear when I'm out there talking to people about why they're looking to move forward with a new website, probably not a big surprise to all of you listening, but design is a really big topic that comes up. And so more specifically nowadays, looking at how accessible their current website design is, as well as just how well it actually aligns with their brand and their brand strategy moving forward. So we can kind of break that down more specifically into looking at accessibility and brand alignment. So on the accessibility side, that really comes down to just trying to remove any barriers that might be on the current site, with the new website design, just to make sure that all of your content is accessible. You really don't want to put all this work into having great content and then have people not be able to actually engage with it. And that's also a kind of a big part of, your general marketing strategy as well. Like if you're out there, driving people back to your website from social media campaigns, maybe you're using pay-per-click advertising, traditional like print marketing, typically people are sending people back to their website. I mean, that's kind of the cornerstone of your marketing strategy, right? That's your home base. You own that. That's your business asset. This is the communication tool you actually own and control. And so it's really disappointing for marketers when they're doing all of this work on the other side of their strategy, sending people back to the website and then just not getting the results they want because people are having a really hard time engaging with their content. So accessibility is definitely a big piece of it.
So one thing with accessibility that I know that you and Brittany bring up often too, is like it's not just people with lifelong disabilities, it's even like situational stuff too. So it's kind of like it's a best practice thing, not just from and obviously trying to make a website accessible for people with lifelong disabilities or disabilities in general is important, but even things just I know Brittany always uses example of you're out in the sun, you're on a smartphone trying to read a website, trying to order some pizza or something. If you don't have good contrast and your website's not accessible, or on that same note, if you're out, partying, drinking some beers and you're trying to order some pizza, maybe it's not sunny out, maybe it's dark. But if you're temporarily disabled, as far as the way you're thinking, just navigating websites in general, you want it to be easy for people too, obviously. One thing on the design thing too, how often or what's the time frame you typically recommend people get new websites? Is it every 3 years, 4 years? How much do design trends change in your mind that necessitates a new website design?
Yeah, so I mean, that's really going to depend on your industry. If you're in the tech space, for example, 2 to 3 years is honestly very average. That is not unheard of. If you're in more of kind of a traditional space where, you don't want to be too cutting edge, that just doesn't align with your brand. A lot of organizations are more in that 4 to 6 year range. So it can vary quite a bit depending on your industry. And that kind of does tie in with, just looking at brand alignment in general. And so, thinking about your website as really the cornerstone of your online brand, a lot of times that is going to be the first impression people have of your organization and the value you provide. So it's going to be really important that, it's the actual impression you want to make. So if you're out there preaching that you are a high-tech company or you're customer focused and you're easy to work with, your website has to walk that walk, right? Because if it doesn't, people are going to be reading, you're preaching all of these things and saying, oh, we do this, we do that, but it's disconnected from the actual online experience they're having with you. So that's just going to make it really hard right off the bat to actually start connecting with people and building trusting relationships. So yeah, that's a really important part of the equation as well.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, you have a good blog post on that too, which kind of reminded me, when you're looking at not just trying to acquire new business, but acquire new talent, that's a really big thing too. If someone's looking for a job and they go to a website and the website looks old and outdated and clunky, they're going to assume like that whole company's culture is old, outdated, and clunky, you know?
Yep.
So that's an important thing. I think that's part of design too. So.
For sure. And I think really the last thing I wanted to add there is I know it's really easy, when you're just thinking about the design of your own website to just kind of set the baseline at whatever your competitors are doing. And there's a lot of validity to that. That does make sense. I know a lot of people say, oh my gosh, we need a new website because this competitor just updated things and they look way, way more advanced than we do now. And that makes sense. But I also like to remind people that when people visit your website, they're not just comparing you to competitors. They're much more likely to be comparing you to every other online experience they've ever had.
Right.
So the bar is probably set a lot higher than you think it is.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So the item that I wanted to bring up was just content in general, right? So people don't think of website design being related to content directly, but so often it is, right? Because when we have a lot of customers come to us that their websites aren't converting well, people aren't staying on their website very long, or they're not viewing a lot of pages. And more often than not, it's a tie-in between the website design and the website content. So I think that content's a really important thing to think about as part of a new website process, and making sure that you are building in spots on your website, both from like a user journey perspective, but also navigation, that has content that actually talks and tells your story. That's a big thing I know with our customers is that they might have really, really good selling content, right? So if someone's like ready to buy a product, they have all the specs and all the details and all that kind of stuff, but they don't have stuff higher up on that user journey, maybe educational content or maybe like problem awareness type content too. So that tends to be one side of the content of problem is not having user journey related content. The other side typically is not telling your brand story. And like, I think everyone, story branding was a big thing for a couple of years, but it is true, right? Like people buy from companies and they buy from people at companies. And if your website doesn't have pages that are designed custom, that look professional, that tell your story, or if your homepage is not quickly conveying who you are and what you do and who you do it for, that's initially going to hurt your impressions, but also your actual click rate, people staying on your website going forward too. So I think content's a big thing that I'm seeing in just website design projects in general too.
Yeah, James, do you have suggestions on how people can go about sort of analyzing their current content and kind of breaking things down in a way where, you can better outline the different stages of the buyer's journey and just making sure you actually have content that's relevant for everybody?
Oh yeah, so that's the old content matrix. So if anyone watching is interested in this, I have a blog post called The Content Matrix, I think it is, or just feel free to shoot me a message too. But it's on our website. But I like to do a good old matrix, good old business 101, and have my personas across the columns, and then down the rows, I like to have the parts of the buyer's journey, right? So you might have persona A and persona B, and then you have like problem awareness, solution research, and decision making. And then in those boxes in between, you can start filling out content that might be necessary. So good examples, like in that problem awareness phase, you might be having like educational blog posts or webinars or resource library. But then during decision making, you might want to have like team bios or like solutions pages, things that once people know they have a problem and they know they're trying to find a solution for it, they're going to want to do that research further down too. So I really like to use that content matrix just to make sure we're not missing any content, as well as for coming up with new ideas for content too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. Well, while we're on the topic of content, obviously having the ability to go in and edit your content accordingly is a really important thing that marketers need to be able to do. But surprisingly, that is a pain point that I hear come up a lot as well. And it makes sense, right? Because as digital marketers, you're out there using so many different tools. So your website really needs to be just as dynamic to really fit in with that, your entire strategy. So some examples might be, you might be trying to set up a brand new pay-per-click campaign through Google Ads. And so your team needs to be able to set up on the fly a brand new landing page that actually has, content aligned directly with that campaign message. Or maybe just like James was talking about, you have some new educational resources you're trying to create for people kind of higher up in the buyer's journey. So being able to easily add those to the website is going to be super important. So people run into that problem for a couple of different reasons. Maybe their content management system hopefully they have one, maybe they don't, but maybe it's just running on some outdated technology. I hear about difficulty editing website content for people using pre-built themes as well. So there's a lot of different reasons, but there's definitely ways around that. So I know for our team specifically over at Powder Keg, we take the approach of actually integrating our custom websites with WordPress as the content management system, because that is the type of platform that really gives marketers the ability to have the independence and flexibility they need to go in and, like I said, on the fly, add or edit or remove content as needed, so that, again, their website can actually be a dynamic communication tool and not just like a static version of like a print brochure just like sitting out on the internet. Because if that's all you're doing, you're really not getting the most out of your website. So just making sure that it's dynamic in the sense that you can actually update it as needed and keep it timely and relevant is super important.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point, that we get a lot of prospects coming to us with issues with their content management system or CMS. And like you said, we use WordPress, but even like within the realm of WordPress, we use custom themes and we make sure that the design matches up the back end of it so people can edit things easy. But like we have people that come to us with things like Divi Builder or WP Bakery, which like those tools have their place in the world for sure. Like they definitely do, right? Like if you don't have a big budget for a website, like building a website using a tool like that might not be the end of the world.
Right.
But they can be so buggy. They can add, page load time. They can, cause some issues with security for people injecting different scripts in there too.
Even just the extra time it can take to edit those.
Right. Yes.
If you're working for an organization where you have like a built-out marketing strategy to focus on, like that should not be something you're just spending time like spinning your wheels trying to figure out. So.
Right. No, that's a really good point. So that's one thing I always like to clarify with people is like, we use WordPress and there's other CMSs out there, right? There's Joomla, there's Drupal. And you can like build things with Squarespace and Wix. Those aren't just CMSs. They're also companies that host websites too. Both in the realm of WordPress, like we really focus on making it easy to use, because like that's a big thing. Like you're saying that like if you're trying to execute a marketing strategy, you want a website that's easy to use. It's not kind of going to stop you, midstream with your campaigns and stuff too. So.
Yep.
The last thing I wanted to bring up was just SEO. We have people that come to us wanting to rank better, wanting to get more organic search traffic. And our new website really is a good opportunity to start looking at where you're using relevant keywords, both the placement, but also density of them. And then obviously like there's a technical stuff too, like stuff that even, I'm not somewhat, knowledgeable of coding of websites. But there's a lot of like markup and schema that actually happens with how Google's crawler robots actually go onto your website and view content on there too. So it's a big thing when we're building websites. We're making sure that the SEO is both good from like a content perspective and coaching clients on that, but also a technical perspective too. And the other big one with that, that comes up often is speed, site speed, which, is kind of separate of SEO, but also it's important in SEO too, because Google looks at user experience as how they rank people too. But speed's a big thing too. And going back to our last topic there too, of the CMS, like trying to have a very, low impact, fast loading website is a big part of that user experience and the SEO rankings too. So that's the other thing I think is just important to bring up when you're looking at new websites is, SEO is an important thing as far as generating new leads. And a new website's a good opportunity to take a fresh look at that too.
Yeah. And I think that really ties in, like you said, to a lot of other things we were talking about, because, a lot of the kind of like check boxes of a good SEO strategy do require, marketers to be able to easily edit their site with fresh and timely content. And a lot of that content higher up in the buyer's journey that you mentioned too, James. So I think it all kind of comes full circle. Honestly, I think everything we mentioned is pretty closely tied together.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's a good point, I guess, on the usage of keyword on the website and stuff too. So like we use Yoast. So if you have a WordPress website, you should check out the plugin Yoast. But we use that in our websites too. And that's a really important thing for SEO that you don't need a new website for. If you have a WordPress website, you can use a tool like that. Or other CMSs have their own variations of SEO tools too. But just making sure you're actually utilizing those tools to their fullest extent, so you can actually make sure that your keywords are ranking correctly for on page too. So Cool. Well, I guess, is there anything else, Elise, you wanted to mention to the crowd?
No, I mean, those are really all the big things that came to mind, honestly.
Cool. But yeah, obviously, if anyone has any questions, me and Elise are always happy to talk about any of these things or anything else that might come up as you're looking at your website or thinking about a new website project or redesign too. So just reach out to our team and we'd be happy to help. Have a good day, everyone.
Bye.